On November 15, 2017, at 7:19 in the morning, the Argentine submarine ARA San Juan sent her last message. The captain reported that water had entered the forward battery compartment through the snorkel system. There had been a short circuit, there had been a fire. The fire was under control. The captain intended to dive to 40 meters to assess the damage and reconnect the batteries. No one ever heard from ARA San Juan again. 44 people were aboard, 43 men and 1 woman, Eliana Krawczyk, the first female submarine officer in the history of the Argentine Navy. They were returning from a training exercise near Tierra del Fuego, heading north along the Patagonian coast toward their home port of Mar del Plata. The weather was rough, the seas were heavy. The submarine was 36 years old. When San Juan missed her first scheduled communication check the following morning, the Argentine Navy launched a search. When she missed the second check, the Navy declared a submarine missing alert, triggering one of the largest submarine search and rescue operations in modern history. 13 countries responded. 4,000 personnel were deployed. Ships, aircraft, satellites, and underwater vehicles from the United States, the United Kingdom, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Norway, Germany, France, and others converged on the South Atlantic. They searched for 15 days. They covered over 200,000 square miles of ocean. The scale of the international response reflected both the gravity of the situation and the limitations of Argentina's own capabilities. The Argentine Navy, once one of the most powerful in South America, had been hollowed out by decades of budget cuts. It did not possess the deep-sea search equipment necessary to locate a submarine in hundreds of meters of water. It did not have remotely operated vehicles capable of reaching the depths where San Juan might have sunk. It relied almost entirely on the generosity and capability of foreign navies. The United States Navy deployed a submarine rescue chamber and a deep-sea rescue system. The British Royal Navy sent the patrol vessel HMS Protector. Norway contributed the survey vessel Sophie Seam, equipped with a remotely operated rescue vehicle capable of operating at depths up to 600 meters. Russia sent the oceanographic research vessel Yantar, the same vessel that Western intelligence has tracked near undersea cable routes in other contexts. Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, and other South American nations contributed ships and aircraft. The search was hampered by the vast area that had to be covered, the depth of the water, and the rough weather conditions in the South Atlantic in November. The submarine's last reported position was approximate. The time between her last communication and the search's commencement meant she could have traveled a significant distance before sinking. The search area expanded daily as analysts calculated every possible track the submarine could have followed. False leads multiplied. Sonar contacts that looked promising turned out to be geological features on the ocean floor. Oil slicks raised hopes and then disappointments. Reports of emergency satellite phone signals, later determined to be from other sources, sent search teams racing to locations hundreds of miles from the actual wreckage. Each false alarm drained resources and extended the timeline. They found nothing. On November 30th, the Argentine Navy downgraded the operation from rescue to search. The implication was devastating. There was no longer any hope that the 44 people aboard ARA San Juan were alive. And then silence. For an entire year, the submarine was simply gone. She had vanished in the deep waters of the South Atlantic, and no one knew where she was, why she sank, or what had happened in the final hours aboard. This is naval depth. ARA San Juan was a TR-1700 class diesel-electric submarine designed and built by Thyssen Nordseewerke in Emden, Germany. She was commissioned into the Argentine Navy in 1985, one of 2 boats in her class. Her sister ship, ARA Santa Cruz, remains in service. At the time of her construction, the TR-1700 was one of the most capable conventional submarine designs in the world. She displaced over 2,000 tons submerged, carried 22 torpedoes, and could sustain submerged speeds of over 25 knots, unusually fast for a diesel-electric submarine. But by 2017, San Juan was 36 years old. She had undergone a midlife overhaul at the Complejo Industrial Naval Argentino shipyard in Buenos Aires, completed in 2014. The overhaul was supposed to extend her operational life by several decades, but questions about the quality of the work and the availability of spare parts would later become central to the investigation into her loss. Argentina's submarine fleet had been declining for years. Budget cuts, political neglect, and the gradual erosion of the country's naval industrial base had left the Navy struggling to maintain even basic operational capability. Spare parts for the TR-1700 class were increasingly difficult to obtain. The submarines were German-designed, but the original manufacturer no longer existed in the same form. Some components had to be fabricated domestically, and the quality of those locally produced parts was not always equivalent to the originals. The Navy knew the submarines were aging. Internal reports documented concerns about the condition of critical systems, including the battery compartments, the ventilation system, and the snorkel mechanism, but replacing the submarines was beyond Argentina's budget. The choice, as in so many navies around the world, was between operating aging boats with known risks or having no submarine capability at all. San Juan sailed. The sequence of events that led to the disaster began on the night of November 14th. The submarine was transiting on the surface or at snorkel depth, using her diesel engines to charge batteries while the snorkel mast drew air from above the waterline. The seas were rough, with waves of 3 to 4 meters. In these conditions, the snorkel mast periodically dips below the surface as the submarine rolls in the swell. When the mast submerges, an automatic valve closes to prevent seawater from entering the engine intake. When the mast clears the surface again, the valve reopens. This cycling between open and closed is normal. Submarines snorkel in rough seas routinely, but the valve on San Juan's snorkel system failed. Seawater entered the ventilation system and flowed into the forward battery compartment. The batteries aboard a conventional submarine are massive banks of lead-acid cells, each weighing hundreds of kilograms, arranged in rows that fill an entire compartment. They store the electrical energy that powers the submarine when she is submerged and her diesel engines cannot run. When seawater contacts lead-acid battery cells, the result is a chemical reaction that produces hydrogen gas and hydrochloric acid. The hydrogen is explosive. The hydrochloric acid is corrosive and toxic. In the enclosed space of a submarine battery compartment, this combination is lethal. The crew detected the water ingress and the resulting short circuit. A fire broke out. The crew fought the fire and, according to the captain's last message, brought it under control. The captain reported the situation to Shore Command and stated his intention to dive to 40 meters to assess the damage and attempt to reconnect the batteries. This was the last communication. What happened next can only be reconstructed from the physical evidence found on the ocean floor and from hydroacoustic data recorded by monitoring stations thousands of miles away. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization operates a global network of hydroacoustic monitoring stations designed to detect underwater nuclear explosions. On November 15, 2017, at approximately 10:51 local time, roughly 3.5 hours after San Juan's last message, 2 of these stations detected an anomalous underwater sound event consistent with the implosion of a submarine pressure hull. The signal was recorded by the station on the Juan Fernandez Islands off the coast of Chile and by the station on Ascension Island in the central Atlantic. The location of the event, triangulated from the 2 recordings, was consistent with San Juan's projected track. This detection was not reported publicly for several days. The CTBTO shared the data with Argentine authorities, but the information was initially held closely. When it was eventually made public, the families were devastated. The hydroacoustic data proved that San Juan had been destroyed on November 15th, the first day she was missing. The 15-day search, the hopes, the prayers, the vigils at the naval base, all of it had been for people who were already gone. The sound of a submarine imploding is distinctive. It is a sharp, intense pulse of low-frequency energy, generated by the sudden collapse of the pressure hull and the compression of the air inside. The energy released is enormous. Equivalent to a small explosion, the signal propagates through the ocean for thousands of miles, attenuated but detectable by sensitive hydrophones. San Juan had imploded. She had descended past her crush depth, either because the crew lost control of the submarine's buoyancy or because flooding from the battery compartment fire made her too heavy to maintain depth. At some point below approximately 600 meters, the hull failed. The collapse was instantaneous. The 44 people aboard died in a fraction of a second. The 15-day search that followed was, in hindsight, a search for people who had been dead since the morning of November 15th. The families who waited at the naval base in Mar del Plata, who held vigils and pressed the government for information, were hoping for a miracle that was already impossible. The fire, the flood, the descent, and the implosion had all occurred within hours of the last communication. By the time the search ships reached the area, there was nothing to rescue, but finding the wreckage was essential. The families deserved to know where their loved ones were. The Navy needed to understand what had happened, and the country needed accountability. The search for San Juan's wreckage lasted over a year. The Argentine Navy conducted the initial search using its own limited resources and those provided by international partners. Norwegian, American, and Russian survey vessels swept the ocean floor with side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles. The search area was enormous, covering thousands of square kilometers of deep ocean floor along the submarine's projected track. In January 2018, Argentina contracted Ocean Infinity, a private seabed exploration company based in Houston, Texas, to conduct a systematic search using advanced autonomous underwater vehicles. Ocean Infinity deployed the Norwegian multipurpose vessel Seabed Constructor, equipped with 8 Kongsberg Hugin autonomous underwater vehicles capable of surveying the ocean floor at depths exceeding 6,000 meters. The AUVs searched systematically, conducting parallel survey lines across the seabed, their sonars mapping every feature of the ocean floor. The search continued for months. The ocean floor in the area is complex, with underwater canyons, ridges, and sediment plains that made identification of wreckage difficult. On November 16, 2018, almost exactly 1 year after San Juan's disappearance, Ocean Infinity detected a contact that matched the characteristics of a submarine. The following day, November 17th, visual confirmation was obtained. Cameras aboard the AUVs captured images of San Juan's wreckage on the ocean floor at a depth of 907 meters. The images were devastating. San Juan had been destroyed. The pressure hull was fractured and deformed. The bow section, the sail, and the propeller had separated from the main hull. Debris was scattered across the seabed. The implosion had been total. The submarine was not recoverable. Argentine Navy Rear Admiral David Burden confirmed what the images showed. There had been an implosion, the submarine had sunk past its crush depth, and the hull had collapsed under the pressure of the water above it. Burden stated that the submarine was apparently in good condition when she left Ushuaia, but that the water ingress into the battery compartment had triggered a cascade of failures that the crew could not recover from. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern of systemic failures that extended far beyond the submarine itself. The legislative commission that examined the disaster concluded that the sinking was caused by the inefficiency of naval commanders and chronic budget constraints. The commission questioned the quality of the 2014 midlife overhaul. It criticized the Navy for allowing a submarine with known maintenance issues to continue operating. It blamed the Defense Ministry and President Mauricio Macri's government for insufficient involvement with naval affairs and inadequate defense funding. 4 senior naval officers were eventually charged in connection with the disaster. Their trial began in Rio Gallegos in March 2026, nearly 9 years after the sinking. One of the defendants, former submarine commander Claudio Villamid, testified that San Juan had complied with all established rules and requirements and was fit to sail. The prosecution argues that a failure in the E19 valve in the cooling system allowed water to enter the battery compartment, and that this valve should have been identified as a risk during maintenance inspections. The truth is probably simpler and more painful than any courtroom argument. ARA San Juan was a 36-year-old submarine operating in a navy that could not afford to maintain her properly. Her crew was well-trained and professional. Her officers were competent. But the boat was old, the budget was thin, and the margin between safe operation and catastrophe had been narrowing for years. On November 15, 2017, the margin reached 0. The parallels with other submarine disasters are inescapable. In April 2021, the Indonesian submarine KRI Nanggala 402, a 43-year-old German-built Type 209, sank during a torpedo exercise with 53 crew aboard. She too was an aging submarine, overdue for maintenance, operating in a navy with limited resources. She too imploded at depth. She too killed everyone aboard. The pattern is consistent and merciless. Aging submarines, inadequate budgets, deferred maintenance, known risks accepted because the alternative, having no submarine at all, is considered worse. And then one day, the accumulated risks catch up. A valve fails. Water enters a compartment. A fire starts. The crew fights, but the damage compounds faster than they can control it. The submarine sinks. The hull holds for a while, descending through the twilight zone, past the depth where sunlight penetrates, into the permanent darkness below. And then the hull does not hold anymore. The United States Navy eliminated this cycle with the SUBSAFE program in 1963 after the loss of USS Thresher. SUBSAFE certifies every component in the submarine's pressure boundary, every weld, every valve, every pipe fitting. No SUBSAFE certified submarine has ever been lost, but SUBSAFE costs money. It requires industrial infrastructure. It demands a culture of zero tolerance for shortcuts. Not every Navy can afford it. Not every Navy has the industrial base to implement it. And the navies that cannot afford it are the ones most likely to lose submarines. Eliana Krawczyk, the 27-year-old weapons officer who was the first woman to serve as a submarine officer in the Argentine Navy, died alongside her 43 crewmates. She had fought for years to be allowed to serve aboard submarines, breaking through institutional resistance and cultural barriers. She finally earned her place aboard San Juan, and she was aboard when the sea decided that the old submarine's time was up. The families of the 44 crew members have fought for answers since the day their loved ones disappeared. Many have expressed anger at the government, at the Navy, and at the legal system that took 9 years to bring the case to trial. Some have demanded that the wreckage be raised from the ocean floor so that the remains of the crew can be returned to their families. The Argentine government has not committed to a salvage operation, citing the extreme depth and the condition of the wreckage. The political consequences of the disaster were severe. The Argentine Navy's leadership was replaced. The chief of the Navy, Admiral Marcelo Sroor, was dismissed. Defense Minister Oscar Aguad faced intense criticism for the government's handling of the crisis. The Legislative Commission's report was devastating in its assessment, accusing both the military and civilian leadership of negligence and indifference. But the deeper damage was to Argentina's identity as a naval power. Argentina once operated an aircraft carrier, a fleet of destroyers, and a submarine force that was the envy of South America. By 2017, the carrier was gone, the fleet was a shadow of its former self, and the submarine force consisted of 2 aging boats that the Navy could barely keep operational. The loss of San Juan did not just kill 44 people, it killed what remained of Argentina's pretension to being a serious maritime nation. The trial that began in March 2026 in Rio Gallegos may eventually produce a legal verdict, but the verdict that matters has already been delivered by the ocean. ARA San Juan was not fit to sail, not because her crew was incompetent, but because the country that sent them to sea did not provide the resources necessary to keep them alive. The crew did their duty. The system failed them. ARA San Juan lies on the ocean floor at 907 meters in the cold darkness of the South Atlantic. She is broken, scattered, and unreachable. Her crew remains aboard exactly where they died on a November morning in 2017, when the water got into the batteries and the fire started and the submarine began to sink and the hull held as long as it could, and then, in one instant, it did not. 44 people, 1 submarine, 1 year to find her, and a country that still does not have all the answers. This is Naval Depth. Subscribe and stay with us.